Proverbs 3. My son, do not forget my teaching, but keep my commands in your heart, for they will prolong your life many years and bring you peace and prosperity. Let love and faithfulness never leave you. Bind them round your neck. Write them on the tablet of your heart. Then you will win favor and a good name in the sight of God and man. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your paths straight. Do not be wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and shun evil. This will bring health to your body and nourishment to your bones. Honor the Lord with your wealth, with the first fruits of all your crops. Then your barns will be filled to overflowing, and your vats will brim over with new wine. My son, do not despise the Lord's discipline, and do not resent his rebuke, because the Lord disciplines those he loves, as a father and the son he delights in. Blessed are those who find wisdom, those who gain understanding, for she is more profitable than silver and yields better returns than gold. She is more precious than rubies. Nothing you desire can compare with her. Long life is in her right hand, and in her left hand are riches and honor. Her ways are pleasant ways, and all her paths are peace. She is a tree of life to those who take hold of her. Blessed are those who hold her fast will be blessed. By wisdom the Lord laid the earth's foundations. By understanding he set the heavens in place. By his knowledge the watery depths were divided, and the clouds let drop the dew. My son, do not let wisdom and understanding out of your sight. Preserve sound judgment and discretion. They will be life for you, an ornament to grace your neck. Then you will go on your way in safety, and your foot will not stumble. When you lie down, you will not be afraid. When you lie down, your sleep will be sweet. Have no fear of sudden disaster or of the ruin that overtakes the wicked, for the Lord will be at your side and will keep your foot from being snared. I'd like to invite James up for the sermon, and I'll pray for you if that's all right. If you'd like to close your eyes and join me in prayer. Lord God, I want to pray for everyone here this morning as we listen to James bring your word. Take away all of our worries and regrets from the week. Recharge our souls and renew our hope. We also want to pray for those who aren't here today. May they feel your presence and strength through their own struggles and give them rest right now. As we take your word today into next week, Lord, I pray for wisdom in those choices we make and the words we say and sometimes don't say. Please go before us, clear the way, protect us, and guide us with your love and your wisdom. Lord, I pray this all in your name. Amen.
Thank you very much, B.
That's all right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Proverbs 3. We're going through Proverbs, looking at a few chapters, sermons thinking about wisdom. Proverbs is a book about wisdom. It contains wisdom. We'll get to that later in the book. There's a lot of sayings which people may be more familiar with, the Proverbs. But the first few chapters of Proverbs that we're looking at the moment talk about wisdom itself, wisdom as an idea, wisdom as a concept, and basically how amazing wisdom is, how fantastic, how vital it is to get wisdom. The writer of Proverbs, the whoever compiled all of the Proverbs and all the words from the different wise people and Solomon, they are convinced that wisdom is the way to go. That's the way to live. Not just because, it's handy to have. It's a useful thing to have, like car insurance or something like that, but because it actually pays off in your life. Some of the things, the 26 verses that be read, some of the things that they say, if you get wisdom, these are the things you will have in your life. You will have barns that are overflowing with produce. You will have sweet sleep. You will have a long life. You will have health, riches, safety, honor. These are the things that this passage we've read say come as a result of wisdom, having wisdom. Do you believe that? Do you think that's true? Of course you do. It's in the Bible. But do you really believe it? Like when no one's watching and you're not in church and no one's policing you or your thoughts, do you really believe that if you want, a good life, if you want a prosperous life, if you want a healthy life, you don't seek shrewd financial investments, you don't seek amazing experiences, you don't seek a gym membership, you seek wisdom? Do you really think that's the way to go? I mean, is that the way the world works? Let's be realistic. It's not really the way the world works. In fact, if you look around at people who honor the Lord, who put the Lord first, as we were reminded last week, fearing the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Look around the world at people who honor God, who put him first. Are they prosperous all the time? Do they live long lives, dying peacefully in their sweet sleep? Is that true? I heard a story once about a man who was known for his devotion to God. He happened to be a university professor, and he was known for his holiness, his obedience, his generosity. One day, he was in a meeting with his faculty, with his staff, and all of a sudden, an angel appears and says, points at the professor and says, God has seen your goodness, your holiness, and he's decided to bless you with a gift. And the gift you can choose will be one of three things. You can have infinite wealth, infinite wisdom, or infinite beauty. This is what this professor is offered. What would you choose? Well, this professor, as I've said, he's a very holy man. He's read his Bible. He's read Proverbs. Without hesitation, he says infinite wisdom. That's what he chooses. The angel says, done, and vanishes in a puff of smoke. And when the smoke settles, the professor sits there at the table and he's glowing with an unearthly aura of wisdom. And his staff are staring at him, astonished, amazed, awestruck. And then there is silence for a few moments until one of the staff members composes themselves and leans forward and says, say something wise. And the professor looks at them, wisdom in his eyes, and says, I should have taken the money. And maybe that's, the truth. Wisdom isn't all it's cracked up to be. Wisdom's overrated. Maybe we should just take the money. Maybe that's real wisdom in this day and age. Maybe you read other bits of the Bible. You read the book of Ecclesiastes, for example. Also wisdom literature, also attributed to Solomon, where he says in chapter 9, he says, you know what? It's not the fastest who win the race. It's not the strongest who win the battle. The wise don't get fed. The brilliant don't get rich. The clever don't get approval. Instead, time and chance happen to them all. That's what Solomon says there. It's luck. It's pot luck, what happens to you in your life. In chapter 10, verse 19, he says this, a feast is made for laughter, and wine makes life merry, but money is the answer for everything. That's what he says in Ecclesiastes, and maybe that's wisdom. Take the money. That's the wisdom of the world, certainly. Our world is full of wisdom, advice how to get on, and it makes sense, and it works. If you can't be the best, be the first. That's a saying that a lot of businesses live by. A lot of businesses do very well, not because they're the best at what they do, but because they got there first. They beat everyone else there. Work hard, look after number one. Charity begins at home. There's no such thing as a free lunch. Don't eat the yellow snow. All these words of wisdom that our world offers that seem to work, that make sense. The things that govern the lives of people around us. Now, Paul, the Apostle Paul, I think he knew the deal. He's writing to a church in Colossae. This happened a long time ago. They're struggling with people coming coming in and saying, well, we know what Paul says. We know what we've heard. We know how your church was founded. All this stuff about grace and forgiveness and faith. That's all good, but let's not get carried away here. Let's not forget the good stuff. After all, there's no such thing as a free lunch, is there? God helps those who help themselves. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. We know you believe in grace and faith, but there's a few things you need to do, a few things you need to remember that you should be doing. Here's a little list we've made, a list of self-help advice. Let's not call them rules. That's not quite the right language, but here's some things to be getting on with. Make these a part of your religion if you want to please God. And the church in Colossae is sucked into this kind of life, and they're going backwards. They're forgetting grace. They're forgetting the principles that founded them. They're making their religion about regulations. And Paul writes to them and says, it's in chapter 2, this is not Paul, this is not a legitimate translation, this is my translation. He says, why are you doing this? Why are you living this way? You were crucified with Christ and you died to all this old self-help nonsense. Why are you still looking for this? A faith based on human commands and human teaching. You know it's not going to last. You know it's going to fade away, don't you? What you have here, what you are being sold, is a fraud. Something that looks like wisdom, but isn't. Paul knew, you see, that there are things that look like wisdom, that have the appearance of wisdom, but are just fit for the fire. Paul's not stupid. He's not an idiot. He knows how Christianity sounds to the ordinary person. He knows how ridiculous it sounds to talk about a God who died for us, to talk about being freed from our sin by a crucifixion. He knows how that sounds. He knew how it sounded to the learned and the wise thinkers of the day, the religious masters of his time. Paul too mocked it once. And he says to the Corinthians in chapter 1, he says, I know it sounds foolish. It sounds foolish. It's the kind of thing that at best gets people to roll their eyes at you, at worst gets you locked up. To those who think they are wise in the world, to those who think they know how things work, to those who have made a success of their religious lifestyle, Christ crucified is foolishness. It's nonsense. It's an obstacle. But to us who are being saved, is the very salvation and grace of God. This is what Paul says. This is what Paul knows. There is wisdom and there is wisdom. There are things that sound wise, that look wise, that appear to be wise and aren't. And then there's the real thing. That's what Paul thinks. That's what Paul says. One of these is worth seeking and one of them should be thrown out. And how can you tell the difference? That's the question really, isn't it? How do we know the difference between the good wisdom and the bad wisdom, the true wisdom and the fake wisdom? Well, you just need to listen to it. You just need to pay attention to what's being said. What's at the center of the wisdom that is being offered? Who is it about? There is a wisdom that is about you and me, that puts us and our needs at the center. But if you listen to Proverbs 3, listen to some of the wisdom in there, you hear things like this: trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. Honor the Lord with your wealth. Do not despise the Lord's discipline, for the Lord will be your confidence. These are the things that Proverbs offers us as wisdom. And it kind of makes sense, really, if you think about it. Because if it's true that it's God's wisdom that builds the foundations of this earth, then how can you ever hope to have true wisdom without putting God at the center of it? How can it be anything other than a fake, a fraud, if God is not at the center of it? You cannot have true wisdom without God. That's what Proverbs is saying. That's the argument of Proverbs. You cannot find true wisdom just by looking in your own heart. and sort of thinking really hard and examining yourself, you will not find it there. You will find fake wisdom. The real thing can only be found in God. And so, is it true? This is the question we started. Is this true? All the benefits of wisdom, not just the internal peace and all those kind of things, but the external things too. Is it true? Sweet sleep and abundant barns and all those kind of things. Well, I think it is, yes. I think it is. Now, we have to make allowances for the writer's poetic side. Proverbs is full of metaphor, full of rich imagery, exaggeration, which we'll no doubt we'll see when we go through it, because that's a good way to get your message across, to make it stick. But as Oz helpfully explained last week, we're looking at a book that talks about general principles. What are the general principles behind the things that are being said? These are not catch-all experiences. They're general principles. What's being said? What's really being said in Proverbs 3? In all this flowing language, in all this exaggeration, what are the general principles? What is the general principle behind all these things? And I think it's this. If you turn your life towards God, that's wisdom. That's what wisdom is. And if you put God at the center of your life, that's wisdom. And if you do this, then God will make sure you have what you need. That's it. That's what I think the message is here. You will have no need to worry, to let something steal your peace. We still do. I worry about things all the time. I let things steal my peace. And it's frustrating because I know I don't need to. But it's just the way I live my life at times. I let my imagination run away with me. What if this? What if that? But Proverbs says, seek wisdom, you'll have the peace you need. You may not be rich and successful in the way the world describes these things, the way the world understands these things, but you will have enough. One of my favorite bits of the book of Proverbs, chapter 30. We will be looking at this chapter later in the series, but just as a spoiler, if you like, this is one of my favorite parts from the book of Proverbs. In chapter 30, it's this: give me neither poverty nor riches, but give me only my daily bread. Otherwise I may have too much and disown you and say, who is the Lord? Or I may become poor and steal, and so dishonor the name of my God. Wisdom, give me my daily bread. Give me enough, God. Give me just what I need. Wisdom is to ask God for what we need. I think this is why Jesus says, when Jesus says, this is how you should pray. When he teaches his disciples to pray, he lifts this exact phrase from the book of Proverbs. Give us our daily bread. Jesus is right in line with Proverbs here. The focus is on God, depending on God. This is what Proverbs is about. The Lord's Prayer reinforces this theme of Proverbs. It is wisdom to ask God just for what we need. It is not wisdom to take the money. Wisdom is about knowing who provides. Wisdom is about leaning on that knowledge that he will make sure you have what you need. Wisdom is about learning to say, as Paul did, there's Paul again, got quite a lot of mentions in this sermon from Proverbs, which is in the Old Testament. Paul says, I have learned the secret of being content in each and every situation. But what is the fruit of wisdom? Where does wisdom take us? Where does it leave us? I don't know, well, I do. I don't think my barns have ever been full to overflowing. But I know that I have always had my daily bread. I know what it is to hear Jesus say, don't worry about what you will eat and drink or wear. Seek first the kingdom of God, and he'll take care of it. I don't know about having a long life, maybe not, too early to say. But I know what it means when Jesus says, I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. I do not know about being safe all the time or never being in dark places, but I know the Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. For you are with me, and your rod and your staff, they comfort me. I don't know about always having peaceful sleep, sweet and restful sleep, but I do know even the darkness will not be dark to you. The night will shine like the day, for darkness is as light to you. And I don't know about easy, trouble-free, smooth journeys through life. In fact, quite the opposite. I was reminded this week, if you look in the Gospel of Mark, read the story about Jesus calming the storm. I don't know if you know this story. The disciples and Jesus pop in a boat, go across. There's a storm. Jesus is asleep. And the disciples are terrified and wake Jesus up, and he stills the storm with a word. Have you ever realized, you ever noticed why they were sailing through a storm? Because Jesus said to them, let's go and sail to the other side. Jesus, who gets them into that storm. And that's what life is like sometimes. You end up in a storm because you said yes to Jesus. So I know that life is not smooth and trouble-free. Your journeys are not smooth. Your paths are not easy. But I do know that when you acknowledge the Lord, when you seek him first, when you value his wisdom above jewels, then you know where you should be going. And he doesn't make your paths easy, but he makes them straight. He makes them straight.